So this is a bit of a somber note, but it doesn't make sense not to at least mention that when you're hearing this, it's 9/10. It's September 10th, 2021. And tomorrow is the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. And we are three gentlemen in our 30s. Some of our lower 30s, some of them almost pushing 40, but who's counting? I figure we should reflect a little bit on that day in 2001. Where were you? And what 20 years later, it's weird to say legacy because it's obvious what that legacy, it is the moment in history books that we were all now there for. It's weird to hear people like Chris's age or even my brother's age talk about like learning about 9/11 in their history books. Like, yeah, I missed school for like 2 days. It was terrifying. So John, I guess we'll start with you. Your recollection of September 11, 2001.
Yeah, I mean, I was asleep because I didn't have class that morning, and I was in my dorm. My buddy
You were in
Aaron,
college.
Yes, I was in college, freshman in college. My buddy Aaron, who I think you both know, burst into the dorm room, and he was like, "Turn on the TV." Turn it on. I think the second tower had been hit by that point. I'm just like, what the fuck's going on? I was dating a girl whose dad worked at, he was a commodities broker, something, but he worked in World Trade. So like many people that morning, I spent my morning just trying to get through on the phone to see where he was. He ended up being stuck in traffic, so he was fine. But yeah, I mean, I was in a dorm with like a bunch of 18, 19-year-old guys who were talking about, I'm going to join the Marines and the Army and go off to war and all of that kind of talk. That was, I remember that distinctly. There were people going up on a roof to watch the smoke.
And you were in the Bronx because you were in Fordham, right?
I was in the Bronx and Fordham. And it was, you realize in the moment you're experiencing a defining event, the defining event. Actually, I don't know if I realized I realized I was experiencing something that was like, it was surreal. I'm sure there's an argument for some other event in my lifetime that is on par with that. I don't think it's probably a good one. I mean, that is the defining event of our generation. And it hovered over everything for years. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that like, I remember the patriotism that was in the immediate aftermath and how that slowly, we're not getting into a political discussion on this podcast, but like that slowly dissipated over the years. And I remember like always thinking about like, man, remember how much everybody loved this country after 9/11? We're willing to do anything for this guy. And then that kind of just changed and life goes on and things happen. And again, we don't have to talk about them on the show, but yeah. That's my memory. That's what I think of when I think of 9/11. And of course, all the people who lost their lives.
Yeah. Oz.
So I was a junior in high school when it happened, and I went to boarding school. So I was actually in school just outside of DC when it happened. And that morning I was a student prefect. So I had a TV in my room, which most people didn't. And I for whatever reason, I don't think I had a first period class that day. And I remember I was sitting in my room watching the news, sort of flabbergasted. And I went to my chemistry class that I was supposed to at whatever time, and told some people who had not heard yet or had only heard like the faintest rumblings, because these are pre cell phones for everyone and smartphones and everything like that. And I remember about 10 minutes into the class, we were all called. So school, Georgetown Prep, it was a school of 440 guys. We were all called to the auditorium for, an announcement thing. And they told us that, what had happened at the World Trade Center. They told us all this other crazy stuff that ended up not being true, but it was a day of misinformation, the likes of which I don't think we've ever seen. I think they told us a car bomb went off in front of the Capitol, that a plane was shot down on the way to the White House. Just all sorts of crazy stuff came through, and, they canceled school. Folks went home, and I was stuck in my dorm room. And a bunch of us were. And I remember me and a couple of other guys hatched this scheme to try to sneak out and go to NIH to try to give blood, because we thought that would be a good idea. And that was eventually quashed by some of the adults who were in charge. But, I think, John, you really tapped into something, that there was a real sort of, one for all mentality that took hold for a little while. And that was in a lot of ways, obviously some bad came of it too, but in a lot of ways there was a good moment of coming together that I will miss. And I can remember specifically going to sporting events after, and the new metal detectors and pat downs, but there was a sense of we're going to put up with this, and then we're going to go chant USA and go watch our baseball game.
Were you at game 3?
No, I
George Bush pitch game.
Nope. I watched it on TV. I was at Cal Ripken's last game because of it, which was a similar thing. I remember seeing snipers on the roof at Camden Yards and thinking it was just the most surreal thing you could imagine. But that really, for me, it's almost, you think of for me, at least one of the things that flashes my mind is the Springsteen album that The Rising that came out later that year, which is just, it's this sort of moment that for me captures a lot of the positive, I don't want to say positive, but that's really the only word that comes to mind, the positive feelings and sensations that come out of such an otherwise horrible occurrence.
Yeah. So I was in 8th grade, just to make you feel really young. Really old, excuse me. I was in my private school, and I excused myself, as I tended to do, you know how you like ask for a hall pass to go to the bathroom, and then you just like go to the go to the bathroom on the other side of the school. So that way, like, where were you? Kid. I was in the bathroom. Yes, I was very much that kid. It's why I was C's get degrees, John. Anyway, I went to like the bathroom on the other side of the school, which was near the chapel. And I heard a news telecast being played in the auditorium. Like, okay, what's going on in there? And I walked in just to like peek to see what was going on. And all of the teachers were in the back, kind of white-faced and just in shock of what they were watching. Yeah. And I saw the first tower collapse on screen. Oh, wow. And I was like, what movie are they watching? What in the world is on my screen right now? The screen goes blank, and I hear an announcement that all secondary students are to report to the auditorium for an emergency assembly, where they then told us what happened. And I knew my dad. So I knew my dad worked in the city. It's one of those things where you just, dad works there. And I just had never put 2 and 2 together where he could be in the city. Is he uptown, downtown? Ironically, he had been out of work and had been going on interviews, and a month earlier interviewed for an IT job in the South Tower. Oh, wow. So in August. And so like immediately, and this is, again, everybody, pre-cell phones, there's a line for the payphone in my school, and 3 girls ahead of me, she had a father that was a firefighter, and they hadn't been able to get in contact with him for like hours. So she like collapsed at the payphone and left. And then I didn't want to make a phone call. I was very much 13 and wanted to be like, I'm not ready to even call home to find out. My cousin, who was a senior, picked me up and my cousin and took me home to be like, we're leaving school now. And when I got home, my dad was sitting on my front porch. And that was like the first time I knew he was okay. And then the day started to like hit me like, holy cow. Like apparently it's ironic. He was actually on like right off the Cross Island when he got the call from my mom to turn around and come home. Okay. Which is now I live off the Cross Island, which is, little weird sequitur there. But the all for one and one for all that you guys are talking about, it is mind blowing to tell people in 2021 that all of Congress, as divided as we are now, all of Congress on 9/11 stood on the front steps of the Capitol building and sang God Bless America together. Now, it's also weird when you look at the actions of the administration then, that George Bush then went out in his first presidential address after 9/11 and condemned the treatment of Islam and people people of color that are Muslims, and that Islam is peace, and the radical terrorists that did this are not our Muslim brothers and sisters. They are not to be mistreated. They are Americans, and we should deserve to be united in this front. And that is the immediate. way that I thought. Everybody had a USA hat. We were Americans in that time. We were united in that time. And yeah, it quickly faded. But the fear of, can this ever happen again? That
I remember. I remember
like the sense of security that you got, because like all that stuff happens over there, well, just disappeared. Like it was gone, you know? And I can only imagine being closer to the city, or even Oz in DC, how much worse it was for you guys.
Well, there was now you're bringing me back. There was an unknown. We don't have to spend a lot more time on this, but very briefly, there was an unknown of like any day you left your house, if you were going to a place where there's going to be a lot of people, it's like, is this like the next target? Which reminds me of the other event of our lifetime, which could be the defining event, which is the one we're in fucking right now. And this similar feeling of like, what's the next variant? And like, when's the next shutdown going to be? Which again, we don't have to get into that. The only other thing I will say is Oz, I have a feeling you may share this feeling. I don't know about you, Andrew. It blows my mind. It blew my mind when I started to interact with people. This was a feeling I got my first year teaching, actually, when I taught a lesson on 9/11, and kids didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're kidding, right? Like, this is the defining event of our lifetime. I'm like, oh wait, no, they were born like that year or the year after or whatever. And like, they don't fucking care about this. Like, why would, that's an overgeneralization. I'm sure some people cared about it to a certain, but like, it was so overarching in every way. And it dominated our collective thoughts in such a way for so long. So then that was probably my first experience of feeling old, when I talked, when you talk to young people and they're like, what 9/11 doesn't mean anything to me, and just,
yeah. Doing the math right now, and it's maybe for people our generation, I think this might give a little perspective, but we were all closer in age to the first landing on the moon than kids born today are to 9/11.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about, but it gives a little historical perspective. I mean, my parents, of course, remember where they were. My aunts and uncles remember where they were for the moonwalk. And that's just not a thing that exists in my brain. And
we don't care about that.
I named my daughter Astra after the Apollo 1 motto, so I care, but no one else gives a shit.
You're weird.
I know. But no, but being serious, I think it's really crazy to think the way sort of the flow of time and the way that, perhaps the defining thing of all of our young adult lives is, it's going to be COVID or January 6th for this current generation. And it's really, I worry or hesitate to think what it's going to be 20 years from now.
I've thought about how people are going to teach about the pandemic. I'm very curious look, as we get older and we discover the
probably teaching into a fucking screen.
Well, yeah, maybe it won't be post-pandemic is what you're saying. The only other thing I'll add is I've mentioned before, I went to school in Virginia, and going down there, it was interesting. My first 9/11 there, and understanding that like someone who grew up in Michigan or someone who grew up in North Carolina, 9/11 doesn't hit as hard for them. So it was almost as if it felt more personal, 9/11, as the years have gone by, like this, for what happened to us. My uncle, who has since passed away, but he was under a car because he lived in Midtown, and he was out getting a bagel and he was one of the people that went down to see what was happening at the towers and hid under a car after one of the collapses. My aunt, was on her way into worked in one of the World Trades, but turned around and went home. My dad was on his way to, I think he was headed to Long Island City, but would have been across the water from everything. And I think there are so many people like that, lucky enough to say almost. And there's just, obviously we know far too many people that weren't so lucky that day. You mentioned going to Cal Ripken's last game. I had tickets to a Mets game that week that then got rescheduled to the last week of the season. And I remember walking into Shea Stadium and seeing the American garb everywhere, obviously, and the World Trade Center flag being flown in center field, but also being like looking over your shoulder every pitch, like, okay, what's happening?
Yeah.
Like, are we allowed to be here? Are we allowed to go out and be safe again? And it's adding on to how we feel in 2021. It's a similar feeling in a way.
That you literally hit it on. You nailed it. All right. Well, we shall dedicate this episode to all the people who lost their lives in 9/11. And if you're listening to this and you were close to someone or knew someone who unfortunately falls into that camp, shout out to you. Our hearts go out to you. And never forget, as it were.